See you're here, Matt. Could you do a quick sound check for us?
Yeah, you guys copy?
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
Alberto, I see you're here as well. Could you unmute real quick and do a sound check for us?
Sound check. You hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, can. Thank you. I see Waxum, you're here with us. Could you do a quick sound check for us so we can see that we can hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Perfect.
For those of y'all who are joining us right now, we're just giving everybody a minute or two to jump on, and we'll go ahead and get started in just a bit.
Here's the team.
Hey, y'all, just for everyone's awareness, DOTD's having some technical issues, so we're just going to give them a minute or two to address those so they can join via their conference room. They should be in just a moment.
Rob from LDWF, I see you've joined. Could you please do a quick sound check for us, and could you pronounce your last name for me?
Hey there. Sure, I'll be glad to, depending on what part of the state you're in.
I'm in New Orleans right now. Don't hold it against
All
me.
right. Well, if you're in New Orleans, it's Rob Chadouin.
Chadouin, thank you.
If you are in North Louisiana, where I'm from, it's Rob Shadowin.
Okay.
I prefer Shadowin, but call me Rob.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That's probably all I'll have to say. I'm subbing for Jack.
Who did you say we were waiting for, Helen?
We are waiting on DOTD.
They're here. I see Secretary Wilson.
This is Ian. They're actually going to their individual computers to log on too. So the remaining members, Chris Knotts, Pat.
Okay.
All right, Helen, I see Chris Knotts has joined. Chris, you want to do a quick sound check, and then I think we can get started. Chris, your phone might be on mute. If you're joining by phone, you may have to select *6 to unmute your phone.
Secretary Wilson's here.
Oh, great. Well, we heard you great. So I think, Pat, if you're ready to go, we can get started.
Great. Okay. Well, let's get started. I'd like to call the July 30th, 2020 meeting of the Council on Watershed Management to order. This is our first virtual meeting, and so we're gonna have to ask everybody to follow some protocols so we can make sure that we're efficient as we go through this. Please acknowledge your participation in the meeting by entering your name and organization in the chat. That's for the members, of course. We will also be taking public comments from folks. If you would like to provide public comment, we'll ask you to put that in chat and put your address in there, and we can call on you and let you provide your comments at the appropriate time. I think it will be easier if we wait to do that, if you wait to do that until we get to the point where we are doing public comment. So I will also ask that everybody mute your phones unless you're talking so that we can, everybody can hear all the proceedings. And with that, I will ask the council secretary to do a roll call for us, please.
All right. Thank you, everyone. From OCD, Pat Forbes.
Here.
From LDWF, Pat Shadowin.
Here.
From GOSEP, James Wascom.
I'm here.
From DOTD, Secretary Wilson.
Here.
And from CPRA, Bren Haas.
Here.
Thank you all. We have Pat Forbes, James Shadowin, James Waxham, Secretary Wilson, and Bren Haas, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Helen. We are going to do a Pledge of Allegiance, even though we are on video, and Mr. Bren Haas has volunteered to lead us in the pledge.
Thank you, Pat. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. First thing we will do is take public comment because the agenda has been out there for folks to see. So if anybody has comments on the agenda itself, would you please enter that into the chat so we can recognize you and give you an opportunity to take your comments.
Shit.
And Ms. Waller has some excellent written instructions in the chat box if anybody wants to see those.
I don't know how to do that.
I could repeat them verbally very quickly before we start the meeting. Would you like for me to do that, Mr. Forbes?
Please.
All right, so for this meeting, everyone will be muted upon arrival. And also, as if we do hear noises from someone who is not the primary speaker, we will be muting you if we think it is background noise. We do have an opening for public comment at this time, and there will be an opening for public comment at the end of the meeting. We will largely be following a one mic policy, barring any need for council deliberation, in which case all of the microphones of the council members will be open. If you would like to request that you be unmuted, please use the raise your hand feature, in which case we should be able to unmute you, and we will be able to unmute people in the sequence in which they raise their hand. You are also able to unmute yourself if you are dialing in from a phone, pressing *6. So not just pressing unmute on your phone, you may also need to dial in *6. And if you're using the audio on your computer, at the bottom left-hand corner, you have your microphone icon. If you have a question that does not require speaking, or if you would prefer to enter your question or comment into the chat section, please write stack in front of that comment, as well as your name and your residence and your question or comment, and we will be sure to include all of those in the final public comments section at the end. Also, as this is perhaps we may have some audio challenges. When you are if you are using a computer, you can also, under your reactions, you can use a thumbs up if you would like for the speaker to speak more quickly. Also, and any of those comments can go in the chat, and that will be monitored, and we'll do our best to get that information to our speakers.
Okay, thanks very much. And I did not see any indications of desire to provide public comment at this period. Do you see any, Ms. Waller?
I do not. There are several other hosts for the meeting. I would ask if any of the other hosts have received any comments.
I have not, no.
This is Evelyn. I have not. And Ben and I will keep y'all posted. Those of you who are speaking or presenting, we will keep you posted if we comments in the chat that need to be addressed.
Super. Thank you very much. Okay.
Oh, just one quick comment. Someone asked if the meeting will be recorded and posted, and the answer is yes. The recording will be available on the website after this meeting, watershed.la.gov.
Super. Thank you. Okay. First order of business is to get concurrence on the minutes of the March 11th meeting. I hope that all the members of the council have had an opportunity to read those. Are there any objections or edits to those minutes before we approve them?
Seeing no objections, Pat, I move that the minutes be adopted.
Secretary Wilson moves. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Is that Mr. Haas? Okay, hearing no objections, minutes are approved. Okay, thank you all for attending this meeting of the Council on Watershed Management. For those of you who are new to the work of the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, this effort was launched in response to the two historic flood events in March and August of 2016, after which Governor John Bel Edwards charged the state agencies represented here today through an executive order to coordinate statewide floodplain management efforts through a watershed management approach in response to these great floods. It is important to acknowledge the efforts associated with this program to date represent feedback and input and consensus of not only the 5 state agencies represented here, but multiple other state and federal agencies that have contributed through technical assistant, technical advisory groups, through our working group, through meetings around the state. This truly represents a statewide effort. And somebody's phone is not muted. Okay. The mission of this council is to reduce flood risk, improve floodplain management throughout the state, and maximize the natural and beneficial function of the floodplains. And it will take an ongoing coordination of all these partners and many, many more as we go through this process of changing fundamentally the way the state of Louisiana manages its flood risk and its floodplains. In thinking about the Watershed Initiative as a program, for those of you, again, who may be joining us for the first time, a good summary is provided here. It addresses the guiding principles. In brief, we focus on using scientific tools, engineering, and data, and those approaches to ensure that decision-making is objective and transparent. Looking to nature for solutions that will maximize natural functions of the floodplain as well as their contributions to our flood risk reduction, and long-term to have stable, depoliticized decision-making processes for regional watershed management decisions. These council meetings are critical in ensuring that this coordination takes place and the public remains informed of ongoing progress associated with the initiative. I can't stress that last part enough. We will not be successful in our work here unless people all across the state, and that doesn't just mean leaders, it means everybody who serves to benefit from the work, understands it and is bought into the approach that we are adopting. At this meeting today, we will be providing updates on all aspects of the program. Some we have covered in more detail in previous meetings. Some we will cover in more detail here today. specifically the funding, status of the funding, applications for the round one projects, the regional flood risk discussions that we have had with each of the 8 watershed regions around the state in the last few weeks, as well as the next steps towards that regional governance structure and the work that those steering committees have been doing to accomplish that. We'll also discuss ongoing projects in collaboration among the state agencies as that affects this effort and the overall statewide flood risk. First item on the agenda today is an update on our HUD grant agreement. I know everybody is very eager to hear where we are on that. I will tell you, this is not as the chair, but as the OCD director, because we talk almost daily with HUD about this process. We do not currently have the funds available. We have recently submitted, and we think gotten approved, the last piece of the puzzle before we can get the grant agreement in place. So we expect that grant agreement to be imminent, but at this point, we do not have the grant agreement signed with HUD, and consequently the funds are not available. I think Alex can add a little more detail to this, please.
Thanks, Pat. Sure, and I want to just check to see, I'm realizing because of the virtual setting, it might be harder to do this, but if any of the other council members wanted to have any other opening remarks, I just wanted to check before we jump into the HUD agreement. Okay, great. Just making sure we don't just blow through. So I think in short, we want to just make sure we're reiterating that the funds will become available once the grant agreement between the state and HUD is executed, which we expect to happen soon. You know, this is kind of a best guess scenario. We want it to come as soon as possible, but at this point we're saying summer, right? The takeaway here is that once signed, the state can begin to execute the community development block grant, these mitigation funds. And the action plan is the guiding document on how those funds will be spent. So if you're wondering what does that mean, always go back to the action plan online and check it out. It was approved by the council last year in December, and HUD had approved it in February. If you're wondering how to stay in touch on what the status of this is, please do be sure that you sign up for email notifications at watershed.la.gov. We're going to send a press release out. I don't think we're anticipating having a council meeting specifically related to this once it's executed. So please do make sure that you sign up. Next slide, then. And so just to recap, the action plan is all about spending this $1.2 million. It's on projects, data collection, modeling, and policies that we're aligning through the Watershed Initiative to reduce statewide flood risk. It includes a $100 million project funding opportunity for local and regional projects to address immediate flood mitigation needs. This is what we commonly refer to as round one, and it encourages policy measures to advance community resilience. And again, it was just approved this past February. It seems like yesterday, but it was actually quite a while ago. And that's really all we have now. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. If you're not signed up to email, please do, especially with regards to the updates related to the agreement.
Okay. Thanks, Alex. Next, Alex just alluded to the round one piece of the program, and I think Evelyn Campo is going to provide us an update on round one, please.
Thank you so much, Pat. So obviously we are all very anxious to get the grant agreement in place. And we were hoping to provide kind of a better and more detailed update today, but we share everyone's frustration and still being in that holding pattern. And so we're gonna go through what we can do now. And that is to continue to prepare to move this program forward as soon as we get that grant agreement and as soon as it's executed. And so if you're joining for the first time, or if it's been a while since you were in a conversation where we discussed round one, I just want to reiterate that the main objective of the program is to implement low risk, high impact projects that are going to mitigate flood risk and encourage the prioritization of projects through regional collaboration. Thank you. So we expect the full application process to open soon, as Pat and Alex alluded to, as soon as we get that grant agreement executed with HUD. This program would make $100 million available for flood risk reduction projects throughout the state. There's one intake process, and then there's 2 funding allocations. So 60 million of that 100 million will be awarded by the state to projects that score the highest on a competitive basis. And then after that, each region will recommend up to $5 million in projects per region for funding. And you can go to the next slide. Thanks so much. To position the applicants for this program to be ready to move forward quickly once we have this funding available, we're just going to recap some of the important components of this timeline. So the state issued the notice of funding availability and solicited project pre-applications in November 2019, and that was to determine project eligibility. So that's just the first step here. The full application, which is the next step following the pre-application. So that full application is a little bit longer because we have to make sure that the projects that get reviewed and potentially selected in this program don't have unintended consequences. So the early eligibility check was intended to avoid our applicants doing a lot of work for a project that may not be a good fit because maybe it's ineligible, or you know, we don't want people to invest a lot of time and money in designing a project that really may need to be studied further. So pre-applications were due in the middle. Oh, you can stay on there. Pre-applications were due in the middle of January. If you want to just go back to that timeline slide, I think that may be helpful. Thanks. So the pre-applications were due in the middle of January. The state reviewed them and issued either a letter to proceed for roughly 325 of those, or a letter that deemed the project ineligible. That was for about 75 projects. And at this point, we have posted the full application online, and we're preparing to launch the software that will let those applicants go ahead and fill out that application. But we're still in a holding pattern until that grant agreement is signed. And so we still plan to provide 3 months to complete that full application. So we do want to make sure that the applicants for this program still do have ample time to put their information together. And then I wanted to see, Alex, if you wanted to just join in and give us a little bit more comment on the implications of this grant agreement with HUD.
Yeah, thanks, Evelyn. I think what we want to do is just start to manage everyone's expectations related to project awards. Ben, if you could switch back to the slide before with the timeline. We've always been estimating that we could get all the projects scored and completed by winter of 2020. I think we're still hoping for that, but we want to start to manage expectations because this has a lot to do with the number of applications that get submitted. You know, if like 300 applications get submitted, we've got to make sure that we allow the state time to score and evaluate them. And so I just want to make sure that, you know, once the HUD agreement is executed and we receive the full application, we may need to just tweak this a little bit to adjust to ensure that we're doing our due diligence and review. And Pat, I don't know if you want to add anything related to this as well.
No, not really. That's great. Thank you. Just that it's important that everybody know that we are moving this as fast as we possibly can at the state level, and that we are as eager as you, if not more so, to have this rolling. There's been a whole lot of work. We started, as everybody I think remembers, back in December or January, getting this round one process rolling so that we would be sitting on go when the money became available, with expectations that it might have been available this past spring. And here we are today, but hopefully that the approval and grant agreement are imminent, and we'll be moving forward very quickly.
And just one more thing that I wanted to mention to make everyone aware, we have some information on the next slide that I think will just help those engaged with this program to stay informed. We're not planning to have another council meeting to discuss round one at this point. So I would just ask that everyone following this program, make sure that you're signing up for the LWI emails. And make sure that you're familiar, that's on the Watershed website. That's watershed.la.gov. And then within that website, we have a page that you're seeing here that is dedicated to round one program updates. And so, just make sure that you're familiar with that and that you're monitoring that. And if you have any questions on specifics of the program or on your application or anything like that, go ahead and email LWI-round, ROUND, the number 1 at la.gov. And we're very responsive to that. We will go ahead and make sure that your question gets answered. And of course, once we do hear from HUD, there will be information put out by the program. So you're certainly not going to miss anything, but we want to make sure that everybody gets that news as quickly as possible. And the way you do that is you sign up for those LWI emails. And so again, we're going to open this full application period very soon as we can. It'll be accompanied by a press release and e-blast. And so we're just asking everyone to stay tuned.
Okay, thanks very much, Evelyn. Alex, next, I think we're going to have a presentation on the regional capacity building grant program.
That's right, Pat. And I'll be joined with Brad and Alberto from Region 4. I'm sorry, Alberto. But I think, we've just completed a lot of work in the region. And so I'm excited to communicate what that looks like with the steering committees. Before I do that, though, I want to reiterate the purpose of the program, which has some important short and long-term objectives. First, the program is aimed at facilitating regional coordination based on watershed boundaries and the way water naturally moves across the state. Secondly, it provides a means for each area of the state to provide recommendations for regional project selection as part of round one funding. So we just talked a little bit about that $40 million allocation. In order to do this work, regional steering committees have been formed across the state with representation from every parish and bringing together all types of expertise for the purpose of recommending a sustainable, long-term regional governance framework to better manage and implement solutions to our mounting flood risks statewide. While it's ongoing, we have to be clear, too, that we're looking to cultivate state staff capacity for outreach and floodplain management, and we've provided funds to each of these regions to support these activities. Next slide, Ben. Thanks so much. Each region has successfully formed their committees with representation from each parish. They've also adopted their work plans to formulate these program recommendations, and they've recently focused on regional flood risk issues and priorities. Next slide, Ben. And so you might be wondering, like, what does that mean? Regional flood risk priorities is kind of a lot to sort of swallow. Each region, in essence, after they've approved their work plan, has participated in what we call these regional flood risk discussions. A snapshot of Region 4's presentation is shown here, and all the regional flood risk presentations are available online at watershed.la.gov. I think it's really important to acknowledge that these are 8 presentations that cover the entire state of Louisiana that pull together expertise from each region and are starting to create the connections between that expertise, potential resources at the regional level, and are starting to sort of illuminate processes for ways that we can sort of make these changes and improve our flood risk profile statewide. And I think we're really fortunate to have Alberto with Region 4 here with us virtually today. And I'll turn it over to him to talk about some key takeaways from their meeting. They were the first region to have this. So Alberto, take it away. Okay. I don't know if we can hear you, Alberto. You might be on mute. We'll give him a second.
Yeah, I think I figured out. I wasn't able to unmute, but now I'm good. Yeah, thank you, Alex. You know, in Region 4, we did have our regional flood risk presentation and discussion on June 15th. We were actually able to do that in person while social distanced, which was nice. I think it was important to start looking at the data across our watersheds, to consider all of our shared flood risk challenges through many different perspectives. Being reminded as a group to keep wetlands, existing nature, social vulnerability, coastal issues, future projections of risk, and traditional risk factors is very important. We're looking forward to the next exercise and are definitely eager to consider different regional frameworks that can better address growing flood risk statewide and as a region. And while I had the chance and I want to add a couple of general comments on the overall initiative and framework issue by providing a couple of things specific to Region 4. You know, in Region 4, we were fortunate to have representatives from all of our parishes in the region physically meet in one room and knock out the framework and structure that our regional steering committee would operate under in the last quarter of 2019. We were able to get a few in-person meetings under our belt well before COVID took the world by storm. This framework and structure was approved by police juries, including making appointments from all the parishes, as well as the Kashada tribe, which is also in our region. As you know, things get political, and building trust takes time, especially when you have parishes and entities that are not used to working with one another. But establishing those relationships among parishes in the region has been critical for this initiative in particular. And I say these things for two main reasons to keep in mind during this process. One thing that I think you all know will be an ongoing challenge is thinking beyond political boundaries to create true watershed priorities, whether within a region or region to region. So maintaining that consistent and regular communication from the top down, from you guys to local entities, is important to maintain that trust from the top down. And I think that's very important. And I appreciate y'all's efforts in doing that. And I want to also recognize, while I have the chance, that the staff and consultants that are working on this whole thing, whether on the call or not, especially right now when it's very difficult in this virtual setting. They've been patient, adaptable, and very helpful for our region. I'm sure it's been the same for other regions as well. I just wanted to say that while I had the chance. Brad, is there anything else I should add?
That was perfect, Alberto. The only other thing that we wanted to talk about was just, we're going to move on to the next slide, please. So, yeah, as you all know, like, I think we thought we could jump the gun and go back into being in person, and then that was obviously not the case. So every region is adapting to this, and some regions are doing hybrid, but now everyone's doing really good with moving the virtual meetings forward. So thank you all so much. And I know it's like we're planning for flood risk, adapting to the current disaster of the health situation, and doing the best we can. So we appreciate everyone.
Thanks, Brad.
Back to Alex. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we're kind of in a relay for this meeting, so everybody bear with us. But I think on that note, we do want to talk a little bit about what's planned next. And Ben, if you could go to the next slide. So in thinking about these flood risk discussions and everything Alberto mentioned around regional flood risk, they're really intended to provide foundational information for a root cause analysis. And if anybody has had a chance to participate in these discussions, I think one of the things that comes across first is that there is a lot of expertise in these rooms, and they represent regional and local interests. Seeing them come together and talk about their issues, it is helping to understand what gaps may be existing that are preventing them from moving solutions forward. And so what we want to do is build the state and the regional partners' understanding of what these specifics are that are driving their flood risk, so we can begin to isolate gaps and better determine how we can make things better together. And so one of the things that does come up a lot in these discussions is governance, right? And it's as a potential solution for inconsistent decision-making or the need for standards across watershed regions. And I think as we start to think about moving from data to decision-making, we really need to be clear about how we're talking about governance and what we're actually referring to. And it's basically three things, right? It's accountability, where roles and responsibilities are very clearly defined, authority, where decision makers are empowered to face difficult issues, and process, where the processes by which decisions are made are standardized and based on best practices. So that's what you're trying to facilitate with these discussions and these next exercises, this root cause analysis and the governance gap analysis. And we really can't emphasize enough the encouragement that we're trying to push to all of our stakeholder groups and the public in each region to get involved in these meetings. They're open to the public. Please provide your input on what governance should look like in your region. And I think in terms of our next steps, we're in the process now of doing sort of a desk analysis from all the feedback that came from these flood risk discussions across the state. We're isolating those issues that are driving regional flood risk in preparation for an exercise in August. So these exercises will be held in each region all across the state, so we'll continue to move this forward. And then in the fall, we're preparing to assist the regions in making these recommendations on what are those gaps? What do you need to be successful in addressing these mounting flood risks in your region? And so if y'all have questions, we're going to be working really closely with the watershed coordinators in each of these regions to move this along. But again, we're very flexible. We realize that we're in the middle of a public health emergency, but our flood risk isn't going anywhere. So we are trying to get as much done as we can and be reasonable in the process.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Alex, Brad, especially Alberto. Thank you so much for joining us today. This demonstrates how absolutely critical it is that people all across the state at every level of government and individuals are involved in this process for it to be successful. I'd also like to just, for a quick second, recognize Nicolette Jones, who couldn't be with us here today. But she's been working tirelessly on the Watershed Initiative work right up to and occasionally since the recent birth of her baby. So wanted to thank her, even though she couldn't be here with us today. Okay, I believe that next up we are going to get a report, an update on the watershed monitoring, mapping, and modeling programs. I think we have Mr. Ian Trahon and Chuck Berger from DEQ. I'm sorry, Ian is with DOTD. Don't want to be confusing. And Chuck Berger with DEQ to provide that update, please. Ian? Chuck, you're muted as well.
Okay, sorry about that. The host wouldn't allow me to unmute my mic. Thanks, Pat. I appreciate it. Before I begin, I just want to stress the goal of this program is to build tools using leading science and objective data so we can make the most out of every dollar in project funding and avoid harmful effects and potential unintended consequences. This includes helping decision makers study the feasibility and the impact on proposed flood risk projects or flood mitigation measures, assessing the flood risks including the adverse impacts and consequences of mitigation efforts, guiding decisions involving future developments and sustainable community growth, and evaluating the proposed projects, watershed management strategies, and policies. Next slide, please. Quick update. All 7 IDIQ modeling contracts have been executed by DOTD. We're working through the man-hour proposals for each of the 7 modeling consultants related to the first task order to be issued under the IDIQ contracts for modeling, and we're expecting those to proceed in the next couple of months. Modeling consultants have started introducing themselves to the program partners and will be in communities gathering data this summer and fall. They're also coordinating with the regional steering committees to collect existing data and models to avoid any duplication of efforts. The regional steering committees will provide valuable assistance to the consultants with sharing of their regional contact information. With that, I'll turn it over to Chuck, and he can give you an update on the river and rain gauge program.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Ian. I had to unmute myself there. To recap a bit here, we held a webinar in March to encourage stakeholders to contribute their recommendations for needed gauges located throughout the state. From that, we had 99 participants provided input on nearly 500 suggested gauge locations, and we received an additional 100 likes and 60 comments on those gauges. We're also working for a statewide backbone network of gauges in coordination with the United States Geological Survey, NOAA, and the National Weather Service. So with 500 gauge locations being proposed, we obviously need to prioritize the selection of those gauge locations. And to do that, we looked at Hook 8 watersheds with no gauges. We're also looking at areas that have a high flood risk and looking at streams with large drainage areas. We're taking into account important control structures and also critical sites that connect the coastal zones and the inland watersheds. And we'll be working with USGS and the National Weather Service to identify gaps in the gauges locations. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Pat.
I think Pat might be having some trouble unmuting. Helen, can y'all make sure you can unmute?
Okay,
there we go.
It is. Yeah, every time I mute, I get locked back out, sorry. Yeah, no, thanks, Chuck, Ian. That's critical. I know everybody's waiting is eager to have our enhanced gauge system and our models for providing us information we're going to need to make good decisions. I appreciate it. Next, as we've always said from the very beginning of this, this is a team effort among everybody, including state and federal agencies, and our next update will be on efforts to align those activities within state and federal agencies and between state and federal agencies. Alex, I think, is going to start us off talking about the Silver Jackets program.
Thanks, Pat. In short, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they administer the Silver Jackets program, which provides competitive funds in support of interagency efforts and projects. And the Watershed Initiative and the Corps, we have a joint proposal, and it was selected for funding for fiscal year 21 for statewide modeling technical assistance. The award includes $100,000 for each core district in the state. So this would include Vicksburg and the New Orleans districts. And the key takeaway here is that it's going to help ensure that the watershed initiative models conform to the Corps and FEMA standards, that they build on existing data and models, and it helps to eliminate the chance for any duplication of effort in the modeling program. And I think it makes the most out of our project funds, both in the short term and the long term.
Great. Okay, I also want to just invite the council members, and I should have done this at the very beginning. Obviously, if you have any questions or comments as the presenters are going through this, please jump in. Okay, yep, that's exciting. We're super thrilled. Obviously, we've been planning to work with the Corps all along. This just gives us a more official avenue for doing that. Next, I would like to bring up the subject, get a review on nature-based solutions. I think that for all of us, the longer we are in this and the more we learn about it and the more we talk to folks at the local level who really understand their flooding issues, more and more and more it becomes clear that working through nature-based solutions is going to absolutely have to be a critical part of our approach to this work. So with that said, I'm going to invite Mr. Matthew Weigel with Wildlife and Fisheries to please update us on where we are with that.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Appreciate it. The important thing we want to impress at this meeting is that we understand there's a need for Louisiana-specific answers to flood mitigation and watershed management that uses the best available information on both ecological functions and environmental planning. We're working to pull in expertise and research from several different state agencies, as well as our federal partners, to identify high-value approaches that incorporate natural functions in risk mitigation. Also evaluate the cost and benefits of these approaches and strategies, and most importantly, highlight which deserve greater consideration under varying circumstances. This will enable heightened education of state agencies, local governments, and other local stakeholders to better inform project creation, development, and selection, as well as regional priorities. This education is crucial to ensuring effective projects are developed, elevated, and properly implemented in rounds 1 and 2 of CDBG allocations, as well as other state and federal sponsored programs. The program is in the process of also developing a multi-step process for sharing and discussing the information collected by this group in the coming year. That covers our current work on nature-based solutions. And back to you, Pat.
Thanks a bunch, Matt. I know this is changing all the time, and that you guys and the folks in the working group are keeping track of all the new slants out there that might have an impact on the work we're doing. I appreciate it.
Definitely.
Next, we're going to switch to some discussion on non-structural elevations, which we think may well be an important part of the work that we do. I think we have Sam Martin and Jeffrey Gearing to bring us up to date on that, please.
Yes, thanks, Pat. This is Sam Martin with CPRA. And as part of the 2017 Coastal Master Plan, CPRA identified areas near the coast that are projected to have elevated future flood risk due to storm surge and tidal flooding. So we took that information, and in the 2019 plan, there's a pilot non-structural program to design to use non-structural methods such as elevating homes to mitigate that risk. So in order to maximize the effectiveness of the limited funding that's available in that pilot, CPRA worked with various parishes and GOSEP to identify homes in these future flood risk areas, which were already eligible for FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or HMGP, because they already have existing flood risk or have been damaged. So, and the third criteria was that they needed to lack availability of the state's cost share. The HMGP program requires a match coming from the state or the local to match the federal money. And these areas didn't have it. So this pilot has identified 14 homes in Jefferson Parish, and CPRA is putting approximately $460,000 that's available from the non-structural pilot program, and it's going to be leveraged against the HMGP program funds to provide approximately $2.6 million in benefit. So we're buying a lot with a little. So this was collaboration between CPRA and GOSEP to elevate these repetitive loss homes in Jefferson Parish exemplifies the benefit of aligning plans and programs across agencies and jurisdictions, which is what the Watershed Initiative intends to do. It demonstrates how we can improve outcomes for residents and local government by leveraging funds across programs, accomplishing together what neither could do alone, and achieving both programs' goals by executing projects that meet both sets of requirements, both the non-structural program at CPRA and FEMA's HMGP program. And the Louisiana Watershed Initiative is actively looking for opportunities such as this to facilitate cross-program coordination and leveraging of funds. That's all. Thanks, Pat.
Okay. Thanks very much, Sam. Appreciate it. If there any questions on content, we're going to be moving to new business. Any council members have questions or comments relative to anything that we've heard so far? I'm looking for hands up and comments. I don't see anything. Okay, well then we will move on to new business. And I'm sorry, yes, we do have a public comment period yet to come. Okay, so moving on to new business, we really only have one item here, and that is to select the chair and vice chair for the coming year for the Watershed Council.
Pat, I'm so
yes.
sorry to interrupt. Before we jump into that, I do see one question in the chat. It's from Miss Cindy O'Neill, and I'm not sure if she wanted to speak or if she wants me to repeat her question for her. So I'll give her a minute to speak.
Thank you. I looked and didn't see that one. So the question, Sam, is how high will the homes be elevated above BFE?
So I can't give a precise answer on that because I'm unfamiliar with the specifics of the HMGP program, but they will be elevated to the HMGP standard for FEMA. Since we're providing the match in the majority of the federal funds, whatever FEMA requires and the limits that FEMA places on elevations, it's going to conform to all of those programmatic requirements.
Okay.
Hey, Pat, this is Jeffrey Gearing with GOSEP. And also, they will have to meet the requirements, the local requirements, floodplain requirements of Jefferson Parish as well, which could be greater or more restrictive than FEMA's requirements. So Sam and I'll both be happy to touch base with Jefferson to ensure what height they're elevating to.
So it is the greater of the two, whether that's the FEMA standards or the local standards.
It could be, yes, sir, because typically FEMA defaults, or I guess defers to whatever the local standard might be, unless it's below some base flood elevation or something along those lines.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Cindy, if that didn't answer your question, you could follow up. But I don't see any other questions or any follow-up from Ms. O'Neill. So we will move to the nomination for the chair and vice chair for the coming year. I'm going to open the floor to council members for nominations for chair first. Do I have any nominations? Because I'm not doing it again.
Hey, Pat, this is Jim. I'll start it off and nominate Mr. Brent Haas from CPRA.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Chris. I'll second.
Okay, did you get those, Ms. Waller?
I did, thank you. That was Mr.
Wascom with the
Wascom
nomination,
with the
Mr. Knott
nomination.
with the second.
Thank you.
If you could do a roll call now, please, on that nomination.
All right, I will. Thank you all. So this is again to sanction the candidate. Brent Haas is the chair of the Council on Watershed Management, and I will go through in a roll call.
And I want to make sure that we're clear, because we are, each agency is at liberty to have other folks represent them on the council meetings. The nomination is really for the CPRA to be the chair of this council. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. And Mr. Forbes.
Yes.
Mr. Haas.
Yes.
Mr. Shadowin.
Yes.
Mr. Wascom.
Yes.
And Mr. Knotts.
Yes.
That passes with a unanimous vote.
Great. Thank you so much. Congratulations, Brent. The next order of business is to nominate a vice chair. And again, I'll open the floor to nominations.